You think your family Christmas drama was bad? Wait until you hear what happened at these American Jesus parades. We found 49 of the most unholy and hilarious moments where the Spirit moved people to do absolute madness. From a Chihuahua replacing baby Jesus to an angel giving a speech about cryptocurrency. You are not ready for this level of chaos. Hit that subscribe button right now, or the Bethlehem traffic enforcement officer will tow your car. Let's get into the madness. 1. An overzealous uncle dressed in a beige robe decided to take his role as Joseph way too seriously during the town parade. He did not walk peacefully beside the donkey. He pulled out a notepad and started writing fake parking citations for people standing on the curb. He loudly declared himself the head of Bethlehem traffic enforcement to anyone who would listen. A confused young mother watched in horror as he slapped a bright orange sticky note right onto her baby stroller for being double parked. The crowd erupted into awkward laughter. The poor woman tried to explain strollers do not need permits. The uncle simply adjusted his fake beard and moved to ticket a police horse. 2. A frantic parade volunteer realized moments before the start that the plastic baby Jesus doll was missing. She made a panicked decision and grabbed her shivering Chihuahua. She swaddled it in white cloth to place in the manger for warmth realism. The crowd gasped when the holy infant suddenly stood up and started growling at the three wise men. A grandmother in the front row fainted when the baby Jesus leaped out of the straw. The dog chased a shepherd down the street while barking loudly. The terrified Mary tried to stay in character while screaming for the dog to come back. The volunteer just shrugged and said at least the baby was lively this year. 3. A self-proclaimed visionary dressed as the angel Gabriel decided the parade needed a financial update. He stopped the procession and pulled out a microphone to give a speech about cryptocurrency being the new gold. He ignored the script completely. He told the confused families that frankincense was a bad investment strategy in the current market. A dad holding a hot cocoa shouted for him to just fly away. The angel ignored him and started projecting a graph onto the donkey's side. The parade organizer had to cut his mic when he started asking Mary for her digital wallet address. The crowd booed while he yelled, "Buy the dip." 4. A local youth pastor wanted the nativity float to look mystical, so he rented an industrial fog machine. He underestimated the power and cranked it to the max setting right on Main Street. The entire float instantly vanished into a thick white cloud that smelled like burnt vanilla. Spectators started coughing and moving back because they thought the hay bales were on fire. A terrified toddler started crying because he could not see his mom anymore. The float driver had to stop driving for 3 blocks because he was blind. Mary and Joseph were just waving at absolutely nobody inside the gray smoke, while the crowd wondered if the rapture had happened. 5. An enthusiastic teenager in the front row brought a neon green super soaker to the parade. He claimed it was filled with blessed holy water and he was ready to save souls. He waited for the choir to pass by and started spraying them in the face while yelling, "Be cleansed." The sopranos shrieked as their mascara started running down their cheeks. A stern deacon tried to block the stream with a hymnal, but got soaked instantly. The teen argued he was just helping the church efficiency. The police eventually confiscated the weapon. The wet choir had to finish the song looking like they just survived a hurricane. 6. A guy dressed as a shepherd seemed more interested in blockchain than herding sheep. He walked along the barricades showing people a picture of his sheep on a tablet. He tried to sell non-fungible tokens of the animals to elderly couples sitting in lawn chairs. He told a confused grandpa that owning a digital sheep was better than a real one. The grandpa just asked if he could pet the iPad. The shepherd got annoyed when nobody wanted to invest. He eventually stopped the procession to take a selfie for his Discord community. The real sheep got bored and started eating the wise man's velvet robe. 7. The man playing the innkeeper took his villain role to a modern extreme. He stood by the float and told spectators they had to pay extra for premium viewing spots. He called it surge pricing due to high holiday demand. A shocked mother tried to take a photo of her kids near the manger. The innkeeper jumped in front of the camera and demanded $5. He said there was no room at the inn for freeloaders. The crowd started booing him loudly. He just smirked and pointed to a Venmo QR code taped to his chest. The parade director had to drag him away. 8. A strict English teacher volunteered as the parade marshal and brought his own whistle. He decided his job was to police the pronunciation of the word Bethlehem. Every time a spectator or performer said it wrong, He blew the whistle shrilly. He stopped the mayor in the middle of a speech to correct his vowels. The mayor looked furious and tried to ignore him. The marshal kept blowing the whistle right in the mayor's ear. The crowd covered their ears in pain. A teenage drummer eventually threw a drumstick at him to make him stop. He declared the whole town illiterate and marched off in a huff. 9. The woman cast as Mary decided she was the star of the show and demanded total adoration. She sat on the float with her arms crossed and a sour face. She refused to wave at the children unless the cheering reached a certain decibel level. She cupped her ear to the crowd and rolled her eyes when they were too quiet. A confused dad clapped as hard as he could to make her smile. She finally gave a tiny queen wave and went back to sulking. The baby Jesus doll looked more approachable than her. Her husband, playing Joseph, looked down at his sandals in pure embarrassment. 10. A muscular gym enthusiast took the role of a Roman soldier way too literally. He stood at the parade entrance acting like a nightclub bouncer. He stopped random families and demanded to see their identification. He claimed he was checking for biblical accuracy and citizenship. A terrified grandma fumbled for her library card just to get past him. He told a group of teenagers their outfits were not historically accurate for the first century. The teens just laughed and walked around him. He chased them waving a plastic sword until a cop told him to relax. He said he was just protecting the empire. 11. A stubborn dad. Driving the main nativity float, refused to trust the parade markers or the police. He had his phone plugged into the float's massive speakers with the volume all the way up. Suddenly, the entire crowd heard a loud robotic voice scream, recalculating. The driver slammed on the brakes and started arguing with the dashboard. He shouted that Google Maps did not know the historically correct route to Bethlehem. A teenage Mary rolled her eyes while the donkey looked confused. He tried to execute a three-point turn in the middle of the crowded street because the app told him to. The parade halted while he fought with Siri. 12. A cynical history major decided to ruin the magic for everyone by bringing a megaphone to the sidewalk. He watched the nativity scene pass by and started shouting live fact checks at the performers. He yelled that the wise men actually arrived 2 years later and not that night. A mom tried to cover her daughter's ears when he announced that December 25th was a pagan choice. The actors tried to ignore him, but he kept citing academic sources. A nearby Santa Claus finally had enough and threw a candy cane at his head. The crowd cheered as the history lesson abruptly ended. 13. The local high school choir suffered a massive collective brain freeze during their big moment. They started singing the gentle opening verses of Silent Night beautifully. Suddenly, the sopranos drifted off key and confidently transitioned into the Star-Spangled Banner at full volume. The choir director looked like she was having a stroke as she waved her arms frantically. Half the crowd stood up to salute while the other half kept singing Sleep in Heavenly Peace. The resulting mashup sounded like a patriotic nightmare. The tenor section realized the mistake too late and just hummed awkwardly until the song eventually fell apart. 14. A theatrical event planner wanted the grand finale to be breathtaking, so he arranged a release of white doves. He opened the cages right as the music swelled for a dramatic, emotional climax. The birds were apparently starving because they ignored the sky and immediately dive-bombed a popcorn vendor. The poor man screamed as 20 birds swarmed his cart in a feeding frenzy. Feathers flew everywhere, while children cried in terror at the angry birds. The vendor tried to fight them off with a scoop, but they were relentless. The majestic moment turned into a scene from a horror movie within seconds. 15. An elderly gentleman played the role of God the Father perched high atop a decorated golf cart. He was having the time of his life and waved enthusiastically to his grandchildren. He leaned too far over the railing to throw candy and toppled right off the moving vehicle. The crowd gasped in unison as the Almighty hit the pavement with a thud. A child loudly asked his mother if God was dead now. The man popped up instantly and brushed off his knees to show he was fine. The driver did not even notice and kept driving away without the creator of the universe. 16. A local car dealership owner sponsored the main float and insisted on getting his money's worth. He walked alongside the Holy Family wearing a cheap suit and handing out bright yellow flyers. He aggressively shoved coupons into people's hands while yelling his catchphrase. He shouted that Jesus saves souls, but he saves you money on pre-owned sedans. A solemn nun tried to block him from approaching the bishop. He just dodged her and tossed a bundle of coupons onto the baby Jesus. The crowd groaned at the shameless marketing. He was eventually tackled by a security guard near the VIP section. 17. The tech-savvy son of the parade organizer was put in charge of the lighting props. He decided the traditional Star of Bethlehem was too boring and outdated for a modern audience. He secretly replaced it with a giant programmable LED sign he built in his garage. As the float passed the judges' stand, he flipped the switch. The star did not glow with holy light, but instead flashed a giant yellow winking face emoji. The crowd burst into laughter while his father turned bright red. The kid argued it was engaging content. The wise men looked very confused following a smiley face. 18. A massive audio malfunction turned a peaceful hymn into a scene of absolute panic. The sound guy accidentally crossed the wires with a soundboard from a previous Halloween event. Instead of playing Silent Night, the speakers blasted deafening police sirens and breaking glass sounds. Half the crowd instinctively ducked and scattered, thinking it was a real emergency. A grandma dropped her hot cider and ran into a store. The float driver slammed on the brakes, thinking he was being pulled over. It took 2 awkward minutes to shut it off. The silence that followed was heavy with embarrassment and spilled cocoa. 19. A perfectionist dance instructor in the audience could not handle the poor body language on the float. She jumped over the barricade and marched right up to the woman playing the Virgin Mary. She loudly scolded the actress for slouching and looking tired. The instructor grabbed Mary's shoulders and physically adjusted her posture to be more regal. The actress looked terrified and froze like a statue. The crowd watched in shock as the intruder gave a mini lecture on core engagement. Security finally arrived to escort her back. She yelled over her shoulder that the Mother of God would never slump. 20. One of the 3 wise men was clearly a hustler who never stopped working. He used the parade route as a networking opportunity with local business owners. He stopped the camel repeatedly to hand out his business card to shop owners along the street. He was heard negotiating a sponsorship deal with a bakery while holding his gift of gold. He told the baker he could get the other wise men to eat donuts for a price. The other 2 kings had to wait awkwardly while he closed the deal. The parade gap grew huge. He finally ran to catch up, adjusting his turban. 21. A strict church leader with 0 rhythm stopped the entire parade because the clapping was chaotic. He grabbed a microphone and scolded the crowd for clapping off the beat during a hymn. He told 3,000 people they were ruining the musical integrity of the moment. He made everyone stop and restart with a simple 4-4 count. A teenager in the back shouted that this was not music class. The leader glared and waited for total silence before counting them in again. The crowd deliberately clapped on the wrong beat just to annoy him. He turned red and finally gave up. 22. A misguided volunteer dressed as an angel decided to help with traffic control. She stood in the middle of a busy intersection, waving 2 glowing rave sticks. She thought she was being helpful by directing airplanes that were flying 30,000 feet above. She ignored the actual cars trying to cross the street. A confused pilot would not have seen her anyway. The police had to gently guide her back to the sidewalk. She argued that she was guiding the heavenly host. Her wings knocked over a trash can as she was led away. 23. A pretentious photographer wanted an artistic angle that nobody else had. He laid down flat on his stomach right in the middle of the parade route. He claimed he needed a low-angle holy shot of the donkey's hooves. The entire marching band had to split around him like a river around a rock. A tuba player almost stepped on his head. The photographer just kept snapping away and shouting at people to look natural. The parade marshal blew a whistle and threatened to run him over. He rolled away at the last second, still holding his camera. 24. The main float suffered a catastrophic engine failure right in front of the judges. Smoke poured out of the hood and the float ground to a halt. The quick-thinking volunteers did not want to admit defeat. They loudly announced to the crowd that the breakdown was symbolic of humility. They claimed walking was more spiritual than riding in a truck. They made the actors get out and push the heavy float for the last mile. The crowd cheered for their strength. The actors were sweating and cursing under their breath the whole time. 25. An overwhelmed spectator felt the Holy Spirit a little too intensely. He jumped the barrier and ran up to a random guy dressed as a shepherd. He fell to his knees and started confessing his sins loudly. He admitted to stealing his neighbor's Wi-Fi and lying on his taxes. The poor shepherd was just a high school student trying to get volunteer hours. He looked around frantically for help while the man cried on his fake robe. The crowd listened intently to the juicy gossip. Security had to peel the weeping man off the terrified teen. 26. The drummer for the church band decided the hymns were too boring. He ignored the sheet music completely and started playing wild jazz solos. He threw in complex fills and cymbal crashes during Silent Night. The choir tried to keep the slow tempo, but the drummer was in his own world. He closed his eyes and bit his lip, feeling the groove. The pastor looked back in horror as the song turned into a bebop nightmare. The crowd started tapping their feet despite the chaos. The drummer finished with a 5-minute solo that nobody asked for. 27. A patriotic organizer decided that traditional frankincense smelled too foreign. He replaced the incense in the thuribles with hickory barbecue smoke chips. He claimed it was because this is America. The smell of smoked brisket wafted through the crowd instead of holy perfume. Hungry spectators started looking around for a food truck. A dog broke loose and started chasing the smoking container. The priest swinging it looked confused by the savory aroma. People left the parade craving ribs instead of salvation. 28. A micromanager dressed as Joseph carried a clipboard instead of a staff. He walked around the nativity scene giving performance reviews to the other actors. He told the wise men they were walking too slow and lacked urgency. He critiqued the angel for not smiling enough. He even checked the donkey's teeth. The other actors looked ready to mutiny. He stopped to write a note about Mary's wave technique. The crowd thought it was part of a comedy skit. The actors knew he was just being annoying. 29. A vocal spectator was very unhappy with the casting choices on the main float. She stood up and loudly complained that the nativity did not include enough diversity. She shouted her grievances for 5 minutes straight. She then realized nobody was listening and packed up her chair. She left 20 minutes into the parade in a huff. The people around her were relieved she was gone. The float continued on with its eclectic mix of volunteers. A dog barked at her as she stormed off. 30. A float builder was not entirely sure about his biblical history. He hung a massive banner on the side of the truck that read, "Jesus was born here probably." The crowd pointed and laughed at the uncertainty. A history teacher in the audience facepalmed. The builder defended the sign, saying he wanted to be factually safe. He argued that exact coordinates were lost to time. The pastor made him take it down halfway through the route. It remains the most honest banner in parade history. 31. Two rival church groups ended up marching next to each other. They started a passive-aggressive argument mid-parade about theology. The debate shifted to whether clapping was allowed in church. One group clapped loudly while the other stared in judgmental silence. They tried to out-sing each other with different hymns. The resulting noise was a cacophony of sound. The crowd watched the holy war unfold with amusement. It ended when one group turned left and the other turned right. 32. A guy dressed as a shepherd got carried away by the rock music on a nearby float. He ran to the metal barricade and tried to crowd surf. He threw himself onto the unsuspecting families in the front row. They did not catch him. He fell onto the concrete with a thud. His fake staff snapped in half. He stood up looking dazed and dusted off his robe. The crowd asked if he was okay. He limped back to his sheep, pretending nothing happened. 33. A well-meaning volunteer wanted to make the parade fun for kids. She handed out hundreds of glow-in-the-dark halos. She treated them like party favors at a rave. The street looked like a neon runway. The solemn religious tone was completely lost. Kids started using the halos as frisbees. One halo landed on the donkey's ear. The glowing ring spooked the animal. It took 10 minutes to calm everything down. 34. A youth leader with a microphone thought the Bible language was too old-fashioned. He decided to translate the nativity scene into modern slang. He narrated that Mary was ghosted by the innkeeper. He said the wise men brought that drip from the east. The older people in the crowd looked completely lost. The teenagers were dying of laughter. He called the star the ultimate GPS. The pastor eventually unplugged his cord. 35. A perfectionist official paused the entire parade because of a cloud. He shouted that the lighting was not spiritual enough for the photos. He made 300 people wait for the sun to come back out. The crowd started booing and checking their watches. He ignored them and checked his light meter. When the sun appeared, he yelled action. The mood was already ruined. The photos probably looked the same anyway. 36. A generous spectator was confused about the nature of the event. He ran up to the actors and tried to tip them with dollar bills. He stuffed money into Joseph's robe and the angel's wings. He thought they were street performers working for tips. The actors tried to refuse, but he was insistent. He told Mary to buy herself something nice. The crowd laughed at the awkward exchange. He walked away feeling like a philanthropist. 37. The audio technician for a float was in a rush to get home. He accidentally set the pre-recorded narration to play at double speed. The deep voice of the narrator sounded like a chipmunk on caffeine. The solemn story of Christmas became a high-speed comedy. The actors tried to speed up their movements to match. They looked like they were in an old silent movie. The crowd laughed so hard they cried. The float zoomed by in record time. 38. A modern angel decided that thoughts and prayers were not enough. She taped a large QR code to the back of her robe. She walked along the edge of the crowd asking for digital donations. She said she was crowdfunding her new wings. A few people actually scanned it out of curiosity. The parade organizers were furious at the solicitation. She argued she was an entrepreneurial spirit. She made $40 before being stopped. 39. A local politician saw a camera crew and saw an opportunity. He jumped the barrier and inserted himself into the parade line. He walked between the donkey and the wise men waving frantically. He yelled about community visibility in his upcoming campaign. The crowd booed him for ruining the scene. He ignored them and shook hands with a confused shepherd. Security eventually escorted him back to the sidewalk. He claimed he was just showing support. 40. The official parade announcer lost his script in the wind. He decided to improvise the story based on what he remembered. He ended up inventing Bible fan fiction on the spot. He said the three wise men arrived in an Uber. He claimed the shepherds were fighting wolves with lightsabers. The crowd listened in disbelief. A priest ran up to the booth to stop him. He signed off by saying, "Stay tuned for part 2. 41. A fashion-obsessed woman in the front row treated the parade like a runway show. She held up homemade scorecards as the three wise men walked past her. She loudly critiqued the first king for wearing polyester instead of silk. She gave the second king a low score for his clashing color palette. The crowd watched in amusement as she roasted their ancient attire. The third wise man looked nervous as he approached her section. She gave him a perfect 10 for his velvet cape. He bowed dramatically while she blew him a kiss. The other two kings looked jealous of his high score. 42. A clumsy volunteer dropped his fake gold prop in the middle of the street. He panicked and stopped the entire procession to retrieve it. Instead of rushing, he decided to make a moment out of it. He bent down slowly and picked it up with a dramatic flourish. He then stood up and bowed deeply to the left and right. The crowd sarcastically cheered for his recovery. He waved like he had just won an Olympic medal. The float driver behind him honked the horn impatiently. He did one final bow before running back to his spot. The prop was just a painted rock. 43. A float designer wanted a winter wonderland effect using a new type of fake snow. He blasted the biodegradable foam over the crowd as the float passed. The chemical mixture reacted poorly with the humidity and melted instantly upon contact. It turned into a blue sludge that stained everyone's coats and hats. People screamed as they looked down at their ruined clothes. A mother tried to wipe it off her child, but it just smeared worse. The float driver sped up to escape the angry mob. The street looked like a Smurf crime scene. The dry cleaners in town made a fortune the next day. 44. An intense man in a varsity jacket thought the church choir needed better direction. He stood on a bench and started using aggressive hand signals like a football coach. He signaled for the altos to go deep and the tenors to hold the line. The choir director looked at him with pure confusion. He tapped his wrist to tell them to speed up the tempo. He blew an imaginary whistle when they missed a note. The people around him moved away slowly. He looked satisfied when the song ended. He high-fived a stranger who left him hanging. He yelled, "Clear eyes, full hearts can't lose." 45. The actor playing Joseph developed a sudden sense of solidarity with a rival float. The crowd was booing a fruitcake advertisement float that was driving ahead of him. Joseph stopped walking and crossed his arms in protest. He refused to take another step until the crowd showed some respect. The donkey bumped into him, but he stood his ground. The parade came to a complete standstill for 5 minutes. The crowd eventually stopped booing just to get things moving again. Joseph nodded solemnly and resumed his walk. He felt like a true peacekeeper. The fruitcake float driver gave him a thumbs up. 46. A detail-oriented man could not handle the timeline errors in the parade. He shouted that the shepherds arrived before the wise men in the Bible. He ran alongside the float, pointing at his watch and yelling about logistics. He told the actors to switch places to match the scripture. A woman dressed as an angel told him to be quiet. He pulled out a pocket Bible to prove his point. The crowd told him to write a letter to the bishop. He stopped running when he lost his breath. He muttered about historical inaccuracy all the way home. He vowed to edit the Wikipedia page. 47. A stressed parade organizer was losing control of the chaotic event. He ran up and down the street sweating profusely in his cheap suit. He screamed at the top of his lungs that this is a reverent event. He yelled it while dodging candy thrown by floats. He yelled it while tripping over a balloon arch. The irony of his screaming ruined the peaceful mood he wanted. A toddler mimicked him and started screaming the same thing. The crowd laughed at his public meltdown. He finally collapsed on a bench while the band played Jingle Bells loudly. He needed a serious vacation. 48. The grand finale float rolled out with a massive glittery banner. The sign painter had clearly skipped the spell check that day. It welcomed everyone to Bethlehem with an A instead of an E. Nobody on the float noticed the glaring error. They waved happily under the misspelled sign. A savvy teenager snapped a photo and posted it online immediately. The crowd whispered and pointed as the truck drove by. The mayor waved from the float, completely oblivious. It became a local meme before the parade even finished. The painter blamed the font choice. The town was humiliated. 49. The parade finally ended after 2 hours of absolute chaos and confusion. The organizers gathered on the main stage looking disheveled and tired. They grabbed the microphone and boldly announced that everything went exactly as planned. A dog was still barking in the distance and a float was smoking. Nearby, the crowd looked at each other in disbelief. The organizer smiled a fake smile and thanked everyone for coming. He quickly exited the stage before anyone could ask for a refund. The town agreed to never speak of it again. The Christmas spirit survived barely. It was truly a miracle. And there you have it. Full stop. The undeniable proof that even the holiest nights can turn into total disasters. If you laughed at any of these, or if you are currently writing a fake parking ticket for a camel, smash that like button right now. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another chaotic countdown. Share this video with a friend who needs a miracle to get through the holidays. Now I have to ask, what is the most insane thing you have ever seen at a local parade? Let me know in the comments below. While you type that out, check out this next video on the screen. Trust me, you do not want to miss it. Full stop. See you there. You.